It began before sunrise, behind the silent stone walls of Windsor Castle, where parliamentary clerks and royal aides gathered under extraordinary secrecy to finalize a decree no one believed would ever become real. But when Meghan, Duchess of Sussex's name vanished from the official Windsor guest registry just after dawn, even veteran palace insiders were left shaken. What started as a quiet administrative correction quickly spiraled into something far larger, a brutal institutional message from the crown itself. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Reports suggest the meeting had been planned with unusual caution. Not announced. Not discussed, not allowed to leak through the usual palace corridors where whispers often become headlines before breakfast. Palace officials, parliamentary administrators, and trusted royal aides were said to have moved through the night with one purpose: to confirm what insiders now describe as the Sunrise Decree, a cold procedural action tied directly to Windsor's most sensitive guest access records. At first, it sounded impossible. A guest list could be changed. An invitation could be withheld. A room could be reassigned. But this was different. This was not a missed envelope or a delayed RSVP. This was the alleged removal of Meghan's name from ceremonial invitation systems linked to Windsor itself, the very heart of royal memory and royal legitimacy. And the timing made it even more explosive. Prince William, according to palace whispers, was reportedly briefed late the night before the decree activated. That detail alone sent a chill through royal circles, because William's involvement suggested this was not casual administration. It suggested approval from the future of the monarchy. It suggested that the crown was no longer reacting emotionally to the Sussex crisis. It was organizing. It was documenting. It was closing doors quietly, permanently, and with terrifying precision. By morning, the silence became its own confirmation. Palace aides were allegedly instructed not to discuss the registry changes. Sussex representatives offered no immediate dramatic response. Royal correspondents, usually quick to detect even the smallest tremor, noticed something stranger than denial: stillness. The kind of stillness that follows a decision already made. And inside that stillness, one phrase began circulating among insiders far more permanent than Frogmore Cottage. Because Frogmore had been a residence. This was recognition. Frogmore was property. This was access. Frogmore was a key handed back. This felt like a name being erased from the machinery of Windsor itself. For Meghan, it was not just a palace slight. It was a symbolic severing from the rooms, rituals, and privileges that once made her part of the royal story. For the monarchy, it was something even colder, a warning that the institution may forgive embarrassment, but it does not forget disruption. But the true shock wasn't the removal itself, it was discovering who inside the monarchy had quietly prepared this operation for years. Few outside the palace even knew the Windsor guest ledger existed. Hidden behind layers of protocol, tradition, and parliamentary procedure, it was never simply a list of names, it was a living map of royal legitimacy. And according to several palace historians, removal from it carried consequences far beyond public embarrassment. For generations, this kind of registry was believed to sit quietly beneath the grander machinery of monarchy. The public saw balcony appearances, state banquets, garden parties, carriage processions, and carefully arranged family gatherings. But behind those moments, there were lists. Names approved. Names paused. Names reviewed. Names protected. And in the world of Windsor, a name is never just a name. It is permission. It is trust. It is belonging. Reports suggest the Windsor Ceremonial Registry connects more than one palace doorway. Buckingham Palace, Balmoral, Sandringham, and Windsor all carry their own layers of invitation, residence, and ceremonial access. To ordinary observers, that sounds like administration. To royal insiders, it is power written in quiet ink. One palace expert allegedly called it the social bloodstream of the monarchy, because whoever remains inside that system can still be summoned, seated, hosted, acknowledged, and remembered. That is why Meghan's alleged deletion caused such alarm. After Frogmore Cottage, many believed the Sussexes had already suffered their greatest institutional blow. They had lost a royal home, a symbolic foothold, a place that once tied them physically to the Windsor story. But this was different. Frogmore was a door. The registry was the corridor behind every door. Losing one residence was painful. Losing access to the machinery that decides future invitations felt colder, deeper, and far more final. And then came the shadow of Queen Elizabeth II. Insiders have long whispered that the late Queen understood these systems better than anyone. She knew that monarchy survives not only through crowns and speeches, but through records, precedents, and the careful control of who is allowed near the center. Reports suggest she protected these ceremonial boundaries fiercely, because she believed the crown could be kind, but it could never be careless. So when Meghan's name reportedly disappeared, palace observers did not see a simple punishment. They saw an inheritance of discipline. They saw the old rules waking up again. They saw the late Queen's quiet architecture still holding the walls together, even after her death. For Harry, the meaning was just as painful. His position was no longer only personal. It became procedural. If Meghan's place in the Windsor guest system could be removed, then every future appearance, every return, every royal doorway became uncertain. The Sussex story had moved beyond emotion and into official silence. And that silence carried the most frightening message of all. Once Windsor begins erasing in paperwork, it has already decided what history is allowed to remember. Yet insiders claim the registry itself was only the surface layer of a much deeper royal counteroffensive already underway. According to whispers circulating through royal administrative circles, the turning point came after a series of alleged private lobbying efforts tied to future Windsor appearances and ceremonial access requests. What some interpreted as reconciliation attempts, others reportedly viewed as an unforgivable overreach during one of the monarchy's most vulnerable moments. By early 2026, the mood inside the royal institution had reportedly changed. It was no longer the uneasy silence that followed interviews, memoirs, and public accusations. This was something sharper, more controlled, more dangerous. King Charles III's continuing health struggles had created a fragile atmosphere around the crown. And every request, every rumor, every attempted return to royal spaces was suddenly weighed against one brutal question. Would this protect the monarchy? Or expose it? Reports suggest the dispute began to intensify around future ceremonial attendance. There were whispers of names being raised, invitations being questioned, and old access points being quietly tested. To some sympathetic voices, it may have looked like an attempt to rebuild a bridge, but to senior palace figures, it allegedly looked like pressure. A push to re-enter the royal stage without accepting the discipline that stage demands. That was when the phrase parallel royal branding began circulating among insiders. It was a chilling phrase because it suggested more than family tension. It suggested fear that royal identity could be used outside royal control, that Windsor symbolism could be borrowed, reshaped, and presented to the world without the palace holding the final say. And in a monarchy built on order, that kind of uncertainty is treated like a threat. Senior royals were said to be especially protective of what one insider called the sacred geography of the monarchy. Windsor was not just a castle. Balmoral was not just a retreat. Sandringham was not just a family home. These places carried memory, sacrifice, grief, coronation echoes, and the long shadow of Queen Elizabeth II. To be welcomed into those spaces was to be trusted by the institution itself. To demand access without full trust was, in the eyes of the old guard, almost unthinkable. Then came the reported involvement of parliamentary aides. That detail changed everything. Once officials allegedly began consulting over definitions of guest status and ceremonial access, the matter moved beyond personal resentment. It became procedural, legalistic, cold. The palace was no longer simply deciding who should attend a gathering. It was defining who still belonged within the official architecture of Windsor. Prince William and Princess Anne were reportedly aligned in supporting firmer enforcement. And that alliance, if true, carried enormous weight. William represented the monarchy's future. Anne represented its steel. Together, they were not interested in emotional bargaining. They were interested in boundaries, precedent, and survival. By the time media insiders began calling the tensions irreversible, the damage had already passed the point of easy repair. Meghan's name was becoming part of something larger than scandal. It was becoming a test case for whether the crown could still defend itself when family wounds threatened to become constitutional weakness. But while the public focused on Meghan's removal, a far more powerful figure had already activated the machinery behind the scenes. If reports from palace administrative streams are accurate, Princess Anne did not explode in anger or deliver emotional ultimatums. Instead, she allegedly executed something far colder, a precise bureaucratic operation insiders now refer to as the Iron Protocol. A calculated effort designed to protect the monarchy from what the old guard viewed as permanent institutional instability. Anne's power has never depended on noise. It comes from discipline, memory, and a lifetime of understanding how the monarchy truly survives. Not through drama, not through public sympathy, but through rules, records, boundaries, and the quiet enforcement of consequences. And according to insiders, when the dispute over Windsor access reached its most dangerous point, Anne became the figure others looked toward. Because she understood something many had forgotten, the crown cannot survive if every private wound becomes a public negotiation. Reports suggest Anne led internal discussions on ceremonial boundaries with the same directness that has defined her royal life for decades. She was not interested in revenge. She was reportedly focused on structure. Who receives invitations? Who is allowed near certain royal spaces? Who can be publicly associated with Windsor without creating confusion about duty, loyalty, and status? These questions may sound administrative, but inside the palace, they were explosive. Because every answer carried a message. That message became known, in whispers, as the Iron Protocol. Its purpose was allegedly simple but severe. Review access, tighten invitations, protect legacy, and prevent the monarchy from being pulled back into cycles of emotional pressure. It was not designed to create headlines. It was designed to stop them before they could be born. Prince Edward, the quiet guardian of detail, was said to align with the effort. Prince William, carrying the burden of the future crown, reportedly supported stronger enforcement too. Together with Anne, they formed a quiet wall around the institution. Not loud, not theatrical, but firm. The kind of wall built from documents, procedure, and the brutal patience of people who know history is often changed by signatures no one sees. Royal staff were allegedly instructed to review invitation records, residency privileges, ceremonial access points, and old assumptions that had been allowed to remain soft for too long. Nothing was treated as minor. A guest list became a question of legitimacy. A residence became a question of trust. A future appearance became a question of whether the monarchy still controlled its own image. Among insiders, one phrase reportedly dominated: duty over blood. It was harsh, but it explained everything. Family affection could exist in private, but royal access had to answer to the crown. Parliament's alleged cooperation in formalizing guest classifications only made the operation feel more final, more unforgiving, and more impossible to reverse. This was why observers described it not as family drama, but as bureaucratic warfare. The weapon was not anger. The weapon was procedure. And procedure, once activated, does not weep. And once the machinery began moving, even King Charles himself reportedly struggled to stop what had already been set in motion. At precisely dawn, according to multiple royal correspondents, the final confirmation arrived. Administrative systems connected to Windsor ceremonial access had allegedly been updated overnight, and Meghan's removal was no longer rumor, it had become institutional reality. The silence from Buckingham Palace only deepened the shock. By the time the first whispers reached the royal press, the language had already changed. It was no longer about whether Meghan might be invited back, whether bridges could be rebuilt, or whether the Sussexes might one day return to a softer relationship with the crown. The question had become darker, sharper, and far more permanent had Windsor officially closed the gate. Royal reporters reportedly noticed subtle changes in ceremonial documentation references, the kind of quiet administrative shifts that mean little to the public but everything to palace insiders. No grand announcement. No emotional statement. No dramatic explanation. Just altered records, adjusted circulation lists, and a silence so disciplined it felt deliberate. In monarchy, silence is rarely empty. Sometimes it is the loudest confirmation of all. Then came the alleged parliamentary leak. According to those familiar with the matter, Westminster-linked aides had been consulted on official guest status definitions, turning what might have looked like family housekeeping into something far more serious. Meghan's name, reports suggest, was not simply paused or marked for review. It was allegedly erased from future Windsor guest circulation lists, cutting her away from the invisible system that decides who is included, who is remembered, and who is allowed to stand near the institution when history calls. For Prince Harry, the fallout was immediate and brutal. His position was described by insiders as uncertain, but deeply compromised, not because he had been erased in the same way, but because Meghan's removal placed him in an impossible emotional and royal position. To return without her would look like surrender. To remain outside with her would deepen the exile. Either path carried pain, and neither restored what had already been lost. Sources claim King Charles appeared emotionally exhausted by the fallout. That detail mattered. Charles was not simply a monarch reviewing documents, he was a father watching private wounds harden into public structure. Yet even his sadness could not easily reverse a system already moving under the banner of discipline. Palace staff were reportedly instructed to maintain absolute procedural control. No leaks, no explanations, no softening language that could be interpreted as hesitation. Commentators began comparing the move to a form of financial and symbolic excommunication, not because money alone was at stake, but because recognition was, access was, future ceremonial belonging was. The crown had not shouted, it had not argued, it had simply adjusted the machinery, and in doing so, delivered one of the coldest messages possible: some doors do not slam shut, they disappear from the map entirely. But the most devastating consequence was still unfolding behind palace walls, where the monarchy itself began preparing for a future beyond reconciliation. For King Charles III, reports suggest the crisis became deeply personal. Already weakened by illness and mounting constitutional pressures, he now found himself trapped between family loyalty and the institutional survival of the crown, a conflict palace historians describe as the defining tragedy of his reign. At first, Charles reportedly resisted the harshest measures. not because he failed to understand the damage, but because he understood it too painfully. This was not just a policy dispute. It was his son, his daughter-in-law, his grandchildren, a fractured family pulled into the cold machinery of monarchy, where private sorrow can become public consequence before anyone is ready to admit the damage is permanent. But senior courtiers, according to palace whispers, were no longer speaking in emotional language. They were speaking in constitutional language. The phrase that allegedly returned again and again was simple and unforgiving: the firm before the family. To them, Charles could grieve as a father, but he had to decide as a king. And that difference became the wound at the center of the crisis. Queen Elizabeth II's legacy was reportedly invoked heavily during internal discussions. Her rules, her caution, her deep understanding that monarchy does not survive by chasing affection, but by protecting continuity. Insiders suggest her old protocols became a kind of silent authority in the room, reminding everyone that personal kindness could not be allowed to weaken institutional discipline. William and Anne, according to those familiar with the discussions, pushed for irreversible clarity. Not cruelty, clarity. They allegedly believed that half measures had already failed, that blurred lines only created fresh confusion, and that the monarchy could not enter its transition years appearing uncertain about who truly represented Windsor. For William, this was about the future he would inherit. For Anne, it was about the duty she had defended her entire life. Charles was said to be emotionally torn, but politically cornered. Every path hurt someone. If he softened the measure, critics inside the institution might see weakness. If he allowed it to stand, the family fracture would deepen beyond easy repair. That was the cruelest part of the crown. It forced him to choose not between right and wrong, but between pain and greater pain. Some insiders reportedly compared the atmosphere to past abdication-era crises, not because the situations were identical, but because the fear was similar. A monarchy under pressure, a private relationship pulling at public duty, a king forced to understand that love, when placed against the crown, can become dangerous. And so Charles, according to whispers, did what monarchs have done for centuries. He absorbed the hurt. He allowed the machinery to continue. The father may have hesitated, but the crown did not. And in that silence, Windsor crossed another invisible line. And as Windsor adjusted to its new reality, the institution began sending a final message, one colder than any public statement ever released. By the following week, insiders claim the atmosphere inside Windsor Castle had changed completely. Invitations were reviewed, protocol pathways tightened, ceremonial structures quietly rewritten. It was no longer merely about Meghan Markle, it was about reshaping the monarchy for a harsher and more controlled future. The shift was not loud. That was what made it unsettling. There were no dramatic speeches, no public declarations, no emotional confrontations spilling into headlines. Instead, the palace reportedly moved with the cold efficiency of an institution that had decided survival mattered more than sentiment. Meetings became shorter. Access became narrower. Conversations that once revolved around reconciliation now focused on containment, discipline, and long-term stability. Reports suggest palace officials began conducting wider ceremonial access reviews extending far beyond the Sussex situation itself. Old invitation systems were allegedly re-examined, residency privileges quietly reassessed, future royal appearances placed under stricter scrutiny. To outsiders, these changes might have looked technical or administrative, but inside Windsor, they represented something far larger, a monarchy preparing itself for a future where emotional unpredictability would no longer be tolerated near the center of royal life. At the heart of this transformation, insiders increasingly pointed toward what some had begun calling the heirs accord, the growing alignment between Prince William and Princess Anne. William brought the authority of the future king. Anne brought the institutional memory of someone who had spent decades defending the crown without complaint or distraction. Together, they reportedly shaped a harder philosophy inside the palace, one built not on popularity, but on control. Courtiers allegedly tightened rules surrounding future royal appearances with almost surgical precision. Every public association carried new weight. Every ceremonial appearance became part of a larger calculation about legitimacy and trust. Palace insiders described the atmosphere as a new era of controlled legitimacy, where belonging to the monarchy would no longer depend solely on bloodline, but on unwavering alignment with the institution itself. That was why Meghan's removal resonated so deeply within royal circles. According to commentators, it was never intended to stand alone as an isolated punishment. It became a warning, a message to anyone who believed the monarchy could be pressured publicly while still expecting unrestricted access privately. One insider reportedly summarized the new philosophy with chilling simplicity: the crown does not negotiate with instability. As those words spread through Westminster and palace corridors alike, royal observers began noticing the widening distance between the Sussexes and senior royals. The separation was no longer merely geographical. It had become symbolic, emotional, institutional. The bridges that once appeared damaged now seemed deliberately dismantled piece by piece, replaced by silence and procedural finality. And perhaps that was the most haunting part of all. Windsor no longer appeared to be waiting for reconciliation. It was adapting to life without it. The institution had entered a colder phase, one where continuity mattered more than comfort and where stability demanded sacrifice, even when the sacrifice carried a family name. But behind the silence, one final truth lingered over Windsor Castle like morning fog across ancient stone. In the end, reports suggest the Sunrise Decree was never truly about a guest list. It was about legacy, permanence, and the monarchy's ancient instinct for survival. Long after headlines fade and scandals disappear, the institution moves forward exactly as it always has, cold, disciplined, and utterly determined to protect itself from anything it perceives as a threat. For Meghan, the alleged removal marked more than another painful chapter in the Sussex divide. It became a symbol of institutional severance, the kind of quiet royal decision that does not need shouting to be understood. A public argument can be answered. A headline can be denied. But a name removed from the machinery of Windsor carries a colder meaning. It suggests that the palace has stopped debating emotion and started writing history. That is the brutal contrast at the heart of monarchy. Individuals feel betrayal, grief, pride, and humiliation. But the crown thinks in centuries. It does not move at the speed of outrage. It waits. It records. It absorbs the storm, and then it acts through procedure. And when it finally acts, the result can feel merciless because it is not designed to comfort anyone. It is designed to continue. Through it all, the absent influence of Queen Elizabeth II seemed to hover over every decision. Reports suggest her old protocols, her cautious instincts, and her belief in duty above personal drama still shaped the choices being made. She was gone, yet her system remained. Her hand was no longer visible, but the structure she protected still held firm. William and Anne emerged from the crisis as guardians of that structure. William, carrying the burden of a reign not yet his. Anne, defending the old code with iron discipline. Together, they represented the next hard edge of Windsor, less sentimental, less forgiving, and far more determined to protect the crown from confusion. And Charles was left with the heaviest burden of all, A king can sign documents, approve processes, and allow protocol to stand. But a father carries the wound afterward. Reports suggest that behind the institutional calm, he was left with the emotional scars of divided loyalty, forced to watch family pain become palace policy. Now, as the palace closes ranks, a new Windsor order appears to be forming, one built on control, clarity, and the refusal to let personal conflict weaken royal continuity. The message is quiet, but devastating. Access is not guaranteed, recognition is not permanent, and belonging to Windsor means surrendering to something larger than the self. Because within the House of Windsor, scandals may fade, but the crown never forgets. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.